You guys are seeing what you're in for?
Okay, hi, now I can say hi to you. I was just reaching for your leg, so I won't go. It's not that good.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
I don't think they heard you.
Shabbat Shalom.
There you go.
Before my welcome, we'll begin with the words of Shalom Aleichem, page 24. And I want to welcome everybody who's joining us online. I'll say a word or two about the prayer book in a second, though you'll see at least a link pop up on your chat. Again, we're on page 24 as we join together in the words of Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, Akadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Sing with us.
Bolchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bolchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bolchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom. Before we begin formally with our service, and I say a few words about framing what we're about to do together, just a few logistical announcements. The first is I want to welcome everybody who's online. The organization that used to give us the prayer books stopped on January 1st. So you'll see a link. You can actually purchase the prayer book. If you want to have a copy of it, be in touch with me over the week. I'll make sure to figure out a way to get you one. Other than that, you can sit back and enjoy the music and hum and sing along. The same, by the way, for all of us. Some of us know the words, some of us don't know the words. That's totally fine. If at all tonight you're lost, you can always turn to someone and they'll help you figure out where we are in the prayer book or on the page. And just know that you always sometimes with a clap of the hands or a yababa or a bim bim bam, get the same thing as you would out of the service itself if you don't know the words. If you need the restrooms, they're outside to the right. Handicap and all gender bathrooms are in our office to the left. You can find large print prayer books and hearing assisted devices on the right when you walk in and in the office. Daniel Garcia Pedroza is our usher tonight. He can make sure that if there's anything else you need, that you can find those particular things. And finally, if there are any need for an emergency exit, of course, there's the way you came in. But there's an exit here, and if you go through the doors in the back to the right, there is another exit as well. So I've been thinking a little bit this week, as my son has been playing on repeat over and over again, the Maccabees version of Al Hanisim. If you know, it's one of the big kind of Hanukkah songs. And one of the things about being a young kid is that you develop a love for a song, and then even once the holiday has passed, it's as if the holiday keeps going and going and going. But I was thinking about that particular prayer because it's actually a line that appears in the Amidah, that quiet part of the service that we're going to do later, during two particular holidays, during the holiday of Hanukkah and the holiday of Purim, both of which celebrate an oppressor who is going to take away rights and potentially lives of the Jewish people, and what it means to kind of lift up your voice, what it means to speak out for justice and for yourself. And that in that time, al hanisim ve'al hapurkan ve'al hatshuvo ve'al hamilchamot, that there's a certain kind of miracle in finding redemption, even if it means having a fight. That's what that prayer actually means. And there are times in the secular world where you feel that same kind of spirit, that fighting spirit, that pride of the fighting spirit that you have during Hanukkah and Purim. And I would say of the secular calendar, the two weekends that I feel it the most is this particular weekend and the weekend of the 4th of July. This weekend being MLK weekend. In a way, we commemorate what it means to have in our country a heritage of a real struggle. And although there's a lot of work to be done still, for the progress to have been made. In a way, this secular time, MLK Day, has a feeling to it of holiness for anyone who cares about justice. It is itself, the weekend, a secular stand-in for those other holy times throughout the year. And so as I was listening to that prayer, Al Hanisim, that my son was singing and my son was playing, I realized that there are times in our lives to celebrate some of these universal messages that appear in Judaism, and that there are times when they echo out into the everyday that may not have anything to do specifically with our tradition. So tonight we're going to light our candles as we officially usher in Shabbat. And to do that, we're going to turn to page 2 and 3. And as we do each week, I want to call our bat mitzvah up, Stella, to be joined by her immediate family as they lead us in these blessings. So come on up. Who's the first reader?
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Peri Hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh boreshit. Ki hu yom tehila lemikra kodesh, zecher litiat mitzrayim, kivanu v'charta, v'tanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodecha, v'ahava uvratzon, hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh hashabbat.
Amen. L'chaim.
You got something to say?
That was a no grimace.
Yeah.
I saw that.
We're going to turn forward in our prayer book. We're on page number 20 as we join together in the singing of L'chadoti.
L'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai, yidai, yidai, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabela, shamor v'zachor v'dibor echad, hishmi'anu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad, u'shmo echad, l'shemu tiferet v'litchila, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai, yidai, yidai, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai, likrat Shabbat, l'chuven elcha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof ma'aseh b'machshavat chila.
Sing with us.
L'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai, yidai, yidai, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai.
Verse number 5,
Hitoreri, hitoreri, kiva orek umiori, uri, uri, shir daberi, kevod Adonai, alayik nigla, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai, yidai, yidai, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat. L'kabelai.
We rise together, verse 9.
Boi v'shalom, ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'vetzola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, l'chadoti likrat kala, yalalai, 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 b'nei Shabbat.
Kapila Yairai Lecha Dodi Ratkala Yalala 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 B'nai Shabbat Nekabila.
We remain standing, page 28.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Le'olam Va'ed. Yadadai, 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 yadadai.
We're seated together. We're on page 33. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Page 32.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Ahavta Amcha Ahavta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu lemadata, Otanu lemadata. Al Kain Adonai Eloheinu b'shokmeinu uvkumeinu nasiach b'chukecha v'nismach v'divrei Toratcha u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu v'yorech yameinu uvahem negei yomam v'layla negei yomam v'layla v'avatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 34.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai
Page
Elohecha
36.
bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
In a moment, we're going to turn to page 40 and we're going to sing these words, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. This is the song that the Israelites sang as they crossed the Sea to Freedom. And this being Martin Luther King weekend, we recall the fact that the Exodus from Egypt, that story, was a central narrative in the struggle for civil rights. So as we do with many holidays, Mi chamocha becomes kind of a, at least, vessel to sing some of the melodies that feel in the air at the time. So I invite you to join us on page 40 as we sing a particularly familiar melody for this time of year, and we join in that song of freedom.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha netar b'kodesh norah tehilot oseh belev.
Let's do Mi chamocha again now that you know it.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha netar b'kodesh norah tehilot oseh belev. Malachutecha ra'uvanecha. That switched to high holidays immediately. Did you hear that?
Yes.
That was not good.
We can finish with Oh say
So close, yet so far.
We're on page 43. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth, prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We're on the bottom of page 44.
Yismechu v'malachutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Mekadashei, Mekadashei Shvi Shabbat, Kulam Yisbehu, V'yitagu mitu v'chashav.
Yismechu, let's hear you.
Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Yismechu B'malachutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat V'hashvi Ratzita bo V'kiddush Shabbat Chemdad Yamim Otokarata Shabbat Yismechu V'malachutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Yismechu V'malachutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Zecher Lema'aseh V'reishi Shabbat Zecher Lema'aseh V'reishi Shabbat Yismechu V'malachutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat Yismechu V'malachutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat V'korei Oneg Shabbat.
In a moment, I'll invite us to turn to page 46, and after this opening meditation, we'll move into silence through page 62. You can pray either the traditional words on the page or whatever words are in your heart during that time, and when you're finished, you can be seated. So we rise together for our Amidah.
Open my eyes to truth, open my hands to give freely. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love. Open my eyes to truth. Open my hands to give freely. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love. Adonai sefatay tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Open my lips to good words, to pure words. Open my heart to love. as we close this private prayer, it's not worth just the private prayer to us, but also the public prayer that we do together, because the last prayer that's in this section of the service is a prayer for peace. And it's hard to make peace happen alone. So therefore, we ask together as we sing Oseh Shalom on page 62. Oseh Shalom bimramav, Hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru ve'imeru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Turn together to page 253, and we pray together for healing, for those who are in need of healing, for body, mind, soul, and spirit. As my eyes go around the room, I'll invite you to name those names of people who are in need of healing, and then we'll join together in the prayer, noticing, of course, on the screen as names of others who our community is thinking about flash before us. For those online, feel free to put names into the chat.
Avotenu mekor Abraham limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor Abraham liavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. This week we begin a new book in our Torah, the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus. And in it we have the first of really 4 weeks of Torah portions that we tell every single Passover. This week we find the Jews in Egypt meeting a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph and become enslaved. And we have the famous story of Moses, instead of being thrown into the Nile, as Pharaoh tells everybody, floating down the river, being swooped up by Pharaoh's daughter, raised in Pharaoh's palace, only one day to realize that an Israelite is being beaten by an Egyptian taskmaster, and trying to stop that taskmaster, he kills him. and ends up having to flee for his life and running to Midian. And this week as well, he's in Midian, he's now married, and he's shepherding sheep. And he looks up and he sees on the top of a mountain a bush that is burning but still green, that is not consumed. And he goes there and gets a command from God to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. Now Moses is scared to go, he's slow of tongue, and he has a stutter. And so he tells God to find someone else. And God doubles down, saying, look, I am the God of your ancestors, and this is your time. So Moses prepares to go tentative, and we leave him standing at the bush, still not having taken that first step. And that's where we pick up next week. Now, as I've been thinking about this story, I've been thinking a lot about this book that I happen to be in the middle of and how the story relates to it. Now, if you haven't yet registered for it, we've got a really great author coming on Tuesday. His name's Scott McMillan, and he wrote a biography of Fazl Hassan Abed, who I'm going to refer to as Abed for the rest of our talk, because that's the way he referred to himself. And so Scott, by the way, is coming to give a talk on this biography on Abed on Tuesday. And Abed is the founder of an organization which is called BRAC, which began in Bangladesh and became the greatest food and relief organization in the world, the largest one, the most successful of the 20th century. Millions of lives have been saved by BRAC. And so at the beginning of Abed's tenure, kind of founding and working for BRAC, he realized, by the way, that he desperately needed to do this. In 1971, after what was called East Pakistan, through a series of civil wars, became what we know as Bangladesh. And at the time, Bangladesh was the second poorest nation in the whole world. And so he decided that he was going to start this organization and go down there to try to figure out how it is that he could make a difference in people's lives. So at first, he decided, in addition to feeding programs and many other things, that he was going to try to teach literacy to people, because he knew that if you knew how to read, especially if you were a woman at that time, you would be able to find your way out of poverty. And so he set up a series of schools, and they completely failed. The people who came to the schools were bored out of their mind. Look, I'm teaching a young child right now, because I'm his dad, how to read. And there is something in teaching a child how to read, just like teaching an adult how to read, that both can feel tedious for the person learning and for the person teaching at the same time. And especially as an adult, to have a group of adults who seem to know this skill that you don't know can feel disillusioning. And so what Abed was finding was that the attendance would go down and down and down until virtually no one was showing up anymore to any given class that he was offering. So he thought it over. And he realized, after doing a lot of research into the theory of how to teach adults, that actually the key to this was dialogue. Now, teaching how to read doesn't always feel like it's going to be rich in dialogue. It feels as kind of like a one-way, I've got information and you need it. But what he found was that he was able, through teaching these teachers how to teach, to be able to give a degree of agency to the people who were learning the literacy. And so what would happen is they would teach, for example, how to read the word house or how to read the word tiger. And then they would pause, and it was a very slow process because of this, and they would engage the villagers in conversation. What does a house mean to you? Why is a house important to you? Can a tiger build a house? Now that might seem odd, but that conversation became incredibly important because what it helped them understand is their sense of humanity, that they could do things that the animal world could not, including read. It gave them a sense of a superiority of what it meant to be a human being, to embody that. And through that, they didn't just learn how to read, they learned something way more important. They learned how to have a voice. Through dialogue, they understood that their opinions were respected, their opinions mattered. Even at its core, The purpose of that program was to teach them what A, B, and C, what sound they made, how to put them together, at least in their alphabet. The key was also to realize throughout that their voice lifted up collectively would matter. Now, I bring this up in part because of the important question that our rabbis consistently ask about the story of Exodus, which is that the Jews were slaves in Egypt. It's hard to know, somewhere between 200 and 400 years, depending on the mythology. And the question is, why is it that God chose that moment to redeem them? Was it because God finally had a person like Moses who grew up in Pharaoh's palace, who got it and who could go to Pharaoh and kind of speak the cultural language of Egypt? Maybe. But I think it's something a little bit different. I mean, Moses hung out in Midian for a pretty long time. I mean, by the time that he freed the Israelites, he lives to 120 years old, and 40 of those years he's wandering in the desert, which means he's pushing 80 by the time God calls him. And he didn't leave Egypt as an 80-year-old. He actually left Egypt as a middle-aged man and had a family and grew that family and put down roots in Midian. So even if you were waiting for Moses, why didn't God call Moses right away in Midian? What did it matter? And the answer, say our rabbis, is that right before God calls Moses, we see that finally the Israelites cry out to God in their anguish. They're able to find their voice. They're able to realize that their voice matters, that they have a degree of agency. It's not easy always to realize that your voice is important. And although the Israelites didn't have many of the tools to get out of Egypt, to get out of slavery, to push their way out, the simple fact that they realized that there could be a path toward redemption, and they realized that praying for that redemption, that calling out, that screaming out in their pain would actually affect something, was God realizing they were finally ready to be free. And then God sends Moses to them. Finding a voice, finding agency, realizing that in a dialogue between you and the world actually wants to hear from you, is incredibly important and something that we need to do always to ensure that anyone who is facing any kind of trial, any kind of travail, can find their way into that sense of self. Abed did it with the people that he worked with consistently. Moses was able to be called because the Israelites did it, and we can too. No matter what that project is that you're doing to make this world better, sometimes we have a sense of a kind of, messianic or savior complex when we go to do these things. We look at the other and we try to say, how can we use our voice to help them? But that one-way street doesn't work. People see through it in the way that those women saw through it in the literacy program. The key is to understand that even as you seek to make this world better in whatever way, you find a way to dialogue too. To use just a simple example, the point of feeding at a soup kitchen may primarily be to make sure that people get nutrition into their bodies. But if it cannot be a two-way street, if you as the server, if you're going to volunteer at a soup kitchen, don't also at the same time pause and make sure to find the humanity and the agency in the people that you are serving, you're doing a disservice because you're not helping them lift themselves out. Now, all this happens in beginning 1971, 1972. And it really begins to hit its stride a few years later. Now, if you know the history of Bangladesh, you know that very soon afterwards, in 1975, there's a dictator who ends up getting overthrown. And there's a series of political unrest at the time. It's a scary time to be living in Bangladesh. And Abed is still doing his work. And in one particularly scary night, they find that all over town, there's graffiti. And that graffiti is unlike anything you'd expect. It's scratched in charcoal and it's on many walls. And what is that graffiti? It's a bunch of women's names. That was all they knew how to write at the time. But through basically simply writing their names, they were able to show amidst this turmoil that they had a voice and identity and that it mattered. The Israelites had a voice and identity and it mattered. And our voice matters too in our struggle for justice as we lift up those voices of others as well. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to turn to page 282 and rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshid, shelo asanu kigoye haratzod, velo samanu kamishbachot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
We're seated together. We turn now to page 294 as our thoughts go out to those that we've loved and who we've lost. This Shabbat, we remember the following individuals, and as I call your loved one's name, I'll invite you to rise. We remember Barry Abrams, Joan Asioni, Herman Barron, Robert Batkin, Frank Becker, Bess Berg, Edith Berman, Joseph Bianco, Irving Bilo, Max Chasin, Hyman Chavkin, David Convisar, Kate Crest Nopal, Shirley Dinsfriend, Tema Ackerman, Francis Ehrlich, Arthur Feiertag, Adelbert Fleischman, Hannah Forum, Edwin Frank, Seraphima Furman, Daniel Geller, Helen Goldberg, Charles Gruber, John Dittbrenner, Herbert Holtzman, Morton Hyman, Jesse Kaplan, Harry Kaplan, Ben Katz, Jane Landberg, Raymond Lang, Beatrice Levine, Irving Levine, Margaret Lilienthal, Nancy Melman, Susan Morgenstern, Lillian Passner, Minnie Portnoff, Julian Reichman, Lois Rothenberg, Solomon Royal, Lorraine Sadler, Edith Shapiro, Marcella Schifrin, Beth Schoenfeld, Louis Schwartz, Jacob Schwartz, Alan Smith, Tessie Steyer, Ruth Stone, Jerry Sorrell, and Charles Tucker. And those who are in Shiva and Shloshim, Walter Epstein, father of Allison Kuselik, Judith Schenkman Kosak, mother of Deborah Gussoff, Bertha Irina Roth, grandmother of Rebecca Rothman, and Sonia Leone, mother of Maribel Leone. We add to those names any who are in 1 year period of mourning or who are observing a yard site that may not have been on this list. Page 294, we rise together. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah,
B'yom ha'divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayeducho be'Israel, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mivarach le'olam olamei amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudusha b'rechu. Le'elam min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram b'yamav yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, huyaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Please be seated. So before we move into our closing song, which is going to be a reprise of Mi Chamocha, just with different words, we are going to have a few announcements. So tomorrow morning, services are at 10 a.m. as we welcome Stella up as she becomes Bat Mitzvah and reads from the Torah for the very first time publicly. In addition, our Torah study is at 8:30 in the morning that morning as well, virtually. A few other important announcements of things to come. We have a really full calendar over the next few weeks. The first, of course, is I mentioned this book. We're going to have a book talk by Scott McMillan. He's going to actually be joined by Ann Mernon, who runs the local soup kitchen, and they're going to talk about both global and local poverty, and ways that you can deal with both of them. And they'll be in dialogue with each other. I'll be moderating. It's a really great story, and hopefully you get a chance either to read the book or to come there. In addition to that, the next day, we're going to be having our next scribing session. So we've had 2 already. We've got 2 more to go. Our congregation, in honor of Ronnie Pressman's 13th year here, is commissioning a new Torah, and it's really restoring one. And it's already, we've had so many congregants kind of add their own stamp as they're writing a letter or a symbol, a crown in the Torah. And so hopefully you can join us and you can do that, and it would be wonderful to have you. Our Shabbaton is coming up in a few weekends. You want to explain what that is, Ronnie?
So the Shabbaton is a day of food for the body, mind, and soul. It starts out with yoga, tefillah, a great lunch. Of course, there's breakfast in between all of that. 2 sessions in the afternoon. Session Aleph has 4 teachers if you're on site, not hybrid, but services are hybrid. And if you decide to join us online, there are 2 sessions to pick from online. Then there'll be more food because, we're Jewish and that's how it goes. And then there'll be a second session Bet, that is creativity through the Jewish lens. And Rabbi Kushner is going to be a part of a panel discussion with myself, Steph Lurie, and Debbie Gallant, talking about creativity through the Jewish lens. And then, of course, it ends with Havdalah. So that's a pretty full day. $36 for the day, $18 if you're online. It's a great day.
Wonderful. So in addition to that, we've got a couple other upcoming things. On the 30th, that's a Monday, we have a guest speaker coming to the congregation, a rabbi who lives in Brooklyn he lives in Brooklyn, works in Manhattan. And he and I were in rabbinical school together, and he recently wrote a book really kind of questioning the fact that we have this narrative that the American Jewish community is dying. And saying basically, actually, there's a lot of creativity and it's really thriving. And here's all the areas that we should be hopeful for the American Jewish community. And so he's a great author, great speaker, and he's going to be coming to talk about his new book, which is pretty incredible. And then we've got lots of other things happening over these next few months as well. So with that, we're going to end tonight with the words that we sang, the melody to Mi Chamocha to, "We Shall Overcome," in honor of this weekend.
The words will be up on the screen. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall
shall live in peace.
We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Shabbat shalom. Grab a cookie,
Shabbat shalom.
some coffee, meet a new person. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom to the folks on